Welcome to Coffee and Conversation. My name is Honorine, and today I'm with Amy Haggard, who is pursuing a PhD in higher education and is also working for FSU. Amy, thank you for being with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with an introduction.
Yeah. So like you said, my name is Amy Haggard. I currently am in my third year of my PhD program. I am 1 month away from taking my preliminary exam. So that is knocking at the door. I'm very excited about that. I also work in our Division of Student Affairs currently. I am in our Student Conduct and Community Standards Office as an assistant director for Title IX cases here at FSU. I am so happy to be here. I've been here now for over 4 years. I previously worked for the Division of Undergraduate Studies. I did alumni and student engagement work, and it was so wonderful, the group of students and alumni that I got to work with. But now I'm very happy to be serving our Division of Student Affairs. I was born in Tallahassee, so I knew I always wanted to come back and work at Florida State. I also knew I always wanted to get my PhD in this higher education program. My father got his PhD in the higher education program. So he is the first Dr. Haggard. So I'm really looking forward to being the second Dr. Haggard from the same program. It would be just really awesome to do that and complete that. And so this is just kind of a dream come true, if you will, as cheesy as that sounds. But like I said, I've always wanted to work here, specifically in this division, and I've always wanted to get my PhD here. So we're getting really close. I can see the finish line, but it is still a good bit away.
Sweet. I have a lot of questions based on the introduction. That's great. So you said you've always wanted to work in that division specifically. Why?
So also going along with the following in my dad's footsteps, he worked in the Division of Student Affairs here in the conduct office at the time. I'm not sure what the conduct office was called in the early 90s, but he worked in this division. He also is kind of the reason that I wanted to get into the profession. I grew up in a student affairs household. He held many positions in student affairs, ending his career as a vice president of student affairs. And that is my ultimate career goal, is to be a vice president of student affairs. And so this was kind of the place where I wanted to start that trajectory and journey in student affairs. And so I'm very thankful that I was finally given the opportunity to do so here.
Awesome. So it sounds like your dad is your role model.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely my career role model. Well, in multiple different ways, he's my role model. But as far as career goes in higher education, and I'm sad that he is retired, because we were colleagues in a way, higher education colleagues. But it's good to have somebody like that to be able to talk to, and understands the job, so, and how much the job has changed too.
So is he also a mentor? Like, do you seek help from him?
I try not to seek too much. It's funny, he likes for me to figure out things on my own, which is a fun challenge. But obviously, when I got this position, I think he was over the moon, and so we had multiple conversations about it. And he definitely is a mentor as far as how to prepare and kind of have that career trajectory in a division like student affairs, because student affairs changes at different institutions and how it's structured organizationally wise. So he's been a good mentor and a good ear to talk to regarding stuff like that.
Good. So earlier you said you always knew you wanted to pursue a PhD at FSU. Why did you decide to work in between, your bachelor, your master's, and your PhD?
So I took time off after my undergrad because my undergraduate degree was in recreation and sport management. I was a collegiate athlete, so I thought I wanted to work in athletics, university athletics. I did work in university athletics for a short period of time, and then realized I really wanted to make an impact on the greater student population, and not just the student athlete population. And so that's when I started taking positions in academic affairs roles on university campuses. So I think it was about 3 years after grad that I pursued my master's in student affairs and higher education from Colorado State. And so it was during that master's program where I realized completing where I wanted to get career-wise and administratively. So after completing my master's, I wanted to get some more practitioner experience under my belt. I knew I wasn't wanting to be a faculty member, which is very different from a lot of my colleagues and classmates in the program, but I knew that I wanted to be a practitioner in the field and ultimately be an administrator. And so I wanted to have that work experience before I got my doctorate, just so that I could have some years under my belt. So I took 3 years off between undergraduate and master's. I say I took it off. I took it off from school. And then I think it was 4 years between my master's and starting this PhD program. So I think for me, it was just about being as ready as I could be and working full time and doing the PhD part time. I think I would not have been able to balance the two had I not have taken that time off to understand the job and to get my footing it just on the staff side of it.
Yeah, so what would you say you learned from all of this experience that you wouldn't have learned by going straight from your bachelor, your master's and your PhD?
Well, you approach all the discussions in the coursework totally different. I don't mean that as a positive or a negative. You approach it differently because you have firsthand experience. I also think that it really helped guide me in what I wanted to pursue. I would not have necessarily known that I needed to get a PhD in higher education administration had I not had worked in different entities on campus for a few years after my master's. And it was then when I realized, like, not necessarily the necessity of having a PhD, but the importance and what that could bring to furthering my career. And I also think that the experience of having a full-time job helped me understand the necessary balance needed and whether or not I had the capacity to take on 2 classes a semester. And then some semesters I've had 3 classes, but they've not all been 3 credit courses. But I would have never have known how to balance that without having a few years of work experience first.
So talking about balance, how do you balance, a full-time job that you, as you said, is very busy, to being a graduate student, which I know is very busy.
Yes. Yeah, and I know you and I've talked about that many times before, but I think what's important is you have to know what your capacity is and your cutoff is. You have to also, I fully believe in designating a day for just schoolwork. And so I also always remind people that ask me how to balance it, that you have to put in the family aspect too, no matter what people's families look like, whether it's you and pets, you and a partner and kids, knowing that that's part of the equation too. And it's not just school and work, but you've also got to realize what part family falls into that equation. But the way it works for me is I designate a day. Usually Sundays are my days where if I need to block out a long period of time to get schoolwork done, I do. But I also make sure I try to do at least 15 minutes of something every day that goes to my PhD, whether that's reading, responding to a discussion, checking in on the assignments for the week, outlining something. I try to make sure I check in every day. Sometimes it's longer than 15 minutes a day, but no matter what, I have a designated day of the week. And it just so happens that Sundays are usually that day, because by the end of the work week, I need a full Saturday to decompress, to spend time with family, and then to refocus. And Sunday's the best day to do it too, because the way classes are structured, I can wrap up the week and also plan for the next week as well.
So let's talk about your research now. What is your research project on?
So my research project is looking at high achieving students here at Florida State and their meaning making of leadership identity. In my previous position, I was in the Honor Scholars and Fellows House, which I know you're familiar with. And so every day I was around this high achieving student population. And high achieving is umbrella, if you will. It can incorporate many students. I would be focusing, well, I'm going to be focusing specifically on our presidential scholar students here at Florida State, who are, it's like every year we admit 30. I think we are starting to increase that number, that come to our institution. They apply for our honors program, they get into our honors program, and then we invite a certain number of those individuals to come to a presidential scholar interview weekend, where then we decide whether or not they will be a scholar. I chose this specific student group because they all come in top of their class from their high schools, sometimes like their state. And then they're all put in this kind of cohort, and there's 4 different cohorts, and then they're realizing that they're all at the same level. And so I want to make meaning of how their leadership identity starts to form in that setting, where they have to do all these additional educational, not have to, but they get the opportunity to do all these additional educational enrichment opportunities. And then they're put in this almost a spotlight of being even called a presidential scholar. And what does that look like? And how does that identity form as they start to branch out and get involved in other organizations and groups on campus?
Are you going to focus on a specific like group, like class, or with like interviews, and then you're going to follow them along? Because I feel like their identity must change throughout the years,
Yeah.
throughout the failures that they must not be used to as presidential scholars, but everybody
Yeah.
at some point figures in their life.
That's a good question. I did in the fall, I was in my advanced qualitative analysis class. This obviously would be a qualitative research. I'm thinking phenomenology, because I think the shared thing that they have together is the requirements and the journey that they all have to go on. There's a lot of things that they have to do together. I piloted it, so I interviewed 2 students in the fall, and I treated it as if I would my research. And I interviewed one from the junior cohort and one from the sophomore cohort, and I realized I was able to develop like 6 themes right off the bat after listening to both their interviews and starting to analyze the data. And I realized what would be so beneficial is to have at least a representative from each cohort. So not necessarily follow one student through 4 years, but follow certain students through each cohort to kind of come up with the themes in that way. Because I realized there were a lot of similarities and there were a lot of differences, because the junior student, his first year was right before the pandemic, and the sophomore student came in the pandemic. So also seeing how that played into that identity development was very interesting. But to answer your question, ideally, I'm going to try and draw on all 4 cohorts and hopefully have 1 to 2 students from each. Obviously, it being intense with interviews, I think I would do obviously one-on-one interviews. I've also thought about doing potential focus groups, but I need to look at that a little more to see if that could work. But hopefully the goal would be at least 6 to 8 participants to really have that rich interview data and then be able to build themes off of that.
Wow, that's an exciting research. So for my last question, where do you see yourself in 5 years from today?
Oh, 5 years from today, I will be done. I will be a Dr. Haggard, so thank goodness. Because there's no not completing this on time. So I will be Dr. Haggard. Hopefully I would still be here. This is where I want to be. I'm not looking to leave anytime soon. Like I said, I love working here. I've always wanted to serve this division, and I can really see growth for myself in this division. In my current position, there are many pathways that I think I could grow into a potential leadership position in the division, but I would see myself here, not in this position, hopefully a leadership position, whether that's an assistant dean, anything in the Division of Student Affairs. I'd see myself here and I would have my doctorate.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Amy. It was great to know a different aspect of you. We've talked a lot, but never like this. So that was really fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Honorine.